The two new boss relics, the Will of the Balances and the Knight of Dregs, are the latest boss relic additions to this Nightreign DLC, the Forsaken Hollows. And for today, we are going to go ahead and break them down, tell you guys exactly how they work, go over the damage numbers, and also just tell you guys if it's worth running and which characters it's worth running for. First, we're going to start off with the Will of the Balances, which this is a blue relic that comes alongside with improved melee attack power, improved skill attack power, and continuous FP recovery. Now, the melee attack power is a 5% damage increase to all of your melee attacks. So whether it be fists, whips, spears, daggers, greatswords, any single one of them, doesn't matter what the attack, it's going to be a 5% damage increase. And when it comes to the improved skill attack power, this is actually over a 20% damage increase, and this is just going to extend to weapon skills. And when it comes to continuous FP recovery, this roughly recovers 1 FP for every 4 seconds, which ends up being around about 14 to 15 FP for every minute, which for a comparison, a lightning spear spell consumes 18 FP. So this particular perk isn't going to be the greatest. It's like nice utility to have if you're going to be going to like some longer points of interest or doing some longer boss fights, and maybe you can get like an extra skill attack off. Because one thing to keep in mind is that you don't necessarily have to meet the full requirements of FP when it comes to weapon skills, and you only need to meet half of it. So if you are out of FP, it's going to be a lot easier to get the FP back to use the weapon skill than it would be to use a spell. So this relic is very much fine-tuned and designed for those skill spamming players. I would not pair this alongside a spell-based build hoping it'll work out, purely because it has some FP recovery. And although it does give you a melee attack increase, it is only 5%, so I'm not going to use it for every single like just melee predominant character. But when it does come to the characters that do like to use skills the most, it would be the Wilder, Iron Eye, Executor, and the Undertaker. The Wilders is one of those characters that's so versatile, he can use basically any single weapon and get really good damage out of it. And with the Wilder being more likely to find greatswords, it just makes it even better for this particular build, because a lot of the unique skills that come off the greatswords are just fantastic. The Gargoyle's Blackblade, Death's Poker, Ordovus' Greatsword, even all the legendary weapons like the Blasphemous Blade, Darkwind Greatsword, Sacred Relic Sword, all of them just have super powerful weapon skills. And the fact that you can just get 20% more damage right off the rip, alongside some natural FP recovery and just 5% more damage across your regular attacks, it can be a very solid relic for him. The only downside is that you are going to have to sacrifice at least one of those really good character-specific relics that the Wilder has, which is kind of a very similar thing that applies to the Iron Eye as well. Being that all of his character-specific relics are so good, he's not going to have many free slots available for a relic like this one. Now, even though bows do not count as melee attacks, he still can benefit off this relic because there are some really powerful skills out there, like Barrage or Rain of Arrows. You can go spec into these particular types of bows and just end up getting this natural 20% more damage with them. But I do think that melee Iron Eye is just a superior version of the character, more so than just spamming bows. Unless you do want to have like a more passive playstyle and play it safe, then that's perfectly fine. But when it does come to just doing more damage, weapons are just going to do it better. I like to run Dormant Katanas with the Iron Eye, with the Arcane Relic and trying to find the Rivers of Blood. But that particular build could just end up being better on the Executor, because the Executor has lots of freedom when it comes to relics, because his character-specific relics aren't the greatest, and being that he is naturally going to be able to find katanas and get more damage with the Rivers of Blood already, trying to fish for the Rivers of Blood and then spamming that the entire time could be a very viable build option. And when it comes to the Undertaker, being that she is a strength faith character, there are lots of different powerful weapons available to her, and all of them have really good skills. The Marika's Hammer, the Blasphemous Blade, Sacred Relic Sword, Cranial Vessel Candlestand. Even all like the bubble options are really good too, and mean that she's likely to find a hammer. You could definitely have a lot of games where you end up with things like the Envoy's Horn or the Marika's Hammer. Now, unfortunately, past that point with the hammers, there aren't many too powerful weapon skill options. But another good pairing alongside with this would be a Sacred Blade build, because she does have a really high faith scaling, and Sacred Blade purely scales of faith. You could just run a relic that has your starting weapon come with this. So yeah, this is definitely one of the more powerful boss relics in the entire game, because a 20% increase is some of the most powerful attacks in the game. And I guess it's kind of there to put in place to make it more in line with spells, because spell-based builds are super dominant right now. And this definitely helps out the melee characters. But when it comes to the new Knight of the Dregs boss relic, it is a red relic that does come alongside attacks inflict rot when damage is taken, rot in vicinity causes HP recovery, and status ailments gauge slowly increase attack power. Now this relic does many different types of things, and it is pretty confusing, but I will explain it. The first perk, attacks inflict rot when damage is taken, is pretty self-explanatory. Any single time that you do get hit, it's going to apply rot to your weapon. And it is going to be in the form of a weapon buff. So any single time that you have a weapon buff active, this is going to override that. And this buff doesn't really add that much rot. It's about 30 rot buildup, and it's going to last only about 10 seconds as well. The rot in vicinity causes HP recovery is pretty self-explanatory. Whether you or like some enemy or ally nearby gets procced with rot, it's going to start some HP regen, and it definitely can offset the damage over time of rot. But unfortunately, it only lasts about 20 seconds, and status effects like rot and poison can last about a minute, so it's not going to completely negate it. Now, when it comes to the last perk, status ailment gauges slowly increases attack power. This is going to apply a stacking damage buff as long as you have a status effect gauge or a status effect bar be on your screen. And no, you don't necessarily have to get hit or procced with a status effect. As long as the bar is just on your screen, then it is going to give you a damage buff. And the longer that it stays on your screen, the more damage it gives you. The first stack is going to give you roughly 3% damage, and it can go all the way up to 10 stacks, which gives you 45% more damage. Which 45% more damage is pretty much the equivalent of the Evergel relic and having all 7 Evergels cleared. Now, the downside of this is that once the status effect bar does go away, you're only going to really end up having a few more seconds of that buff until it resets. And to get to plus 10 stacks, you're going to have your status effect bar stay on your screen for over 3 minutes. Which, even if you are fighting those bosses that do status effects like Caligo, Sentient Pest, or even like the new Dreglord boss, by the time they actually start to proc status effects on you, and to say that you do get hit by a status effect, by the time that you recover it, or by the time that you actually kill the boss, you're not really going to be getting that big of a damage boost. So already as it is, just for day 3 bosses, it's not going to really do the best, especially if they don't actually proc a status effect. But the obvious way to build around this is if you were to proc status effects on yourself. And there are multiple ways that you can do this. A lot of people would look straight towards seppuku, but the thing is, seppuku doesn't actually leave the bleed status bar on your screen. It just instantly procs you with bleed, which in that instance, it's only going to give you a 3% damage boost for 20 seconds and then go away. You can use things like fetid pots to apply poison on yourself, but fetid pots are basically impossible to come by. The next best thing would be madness. And you can use like the Labor Relic to proc madness on yourself, but it takes so long to do this gesture, like in the middle of a boss fight, or trying to keep it active throughout an expedition is just impossible. It could do very well alongside some madness-based spells. So if you end up finding things like Flame of Frenzy, you could just keep spamming that throughout an entire expedition and very well maintain a good damage boost. Now, the chances of finding a Frenzied Flame incantation tend to be pretty tough, but this definitely feels like a perk that was meant for Deep of Night, because in Deep of Night, there are relic curses that apply status effects to you. Whether it be like below max HP, you take things like poison or rot buildup, or when you take damage, you also have a status applied alongside with it. Now, the taking damage ones aren't going to be as consistent, because if you're getting hit enough times for the status bar to fill up to a point where you're going to benefit off a longer buff, you're probably going to die, because enemies in Deep of Night hit really hard. And if you die, the stacks will reset. So it's only really where you're staying below max HP with the poison buildup below max HP relic that's actually going to be worth using. But this only procs when you're below 85% of your max health. And you can't reliably always just find enemies along your way to damage you enough just to keep the buff maintained. But one thing you can do is use seppuku, because seppuku does 20% of your health, which would instantly proc these types of curses. So I just pair this alongside my seppuku and frost-based build in Deep of Night, and just kept spamming seppuku anywhere that I went. I just had the poison buildup go like almost all the way, then I drank my flask, and by the time that I got to the next boss, I had a pretty decent buff accumulated. Now, unfortunately, this is going to waste a whole bunch of flasks, and also just waste a whole bunch of your time as well, which means less time being spent actually killing bosses and getting decent weapon passives, and good damage negation passives too. So it definitely wasn't the most like friendly build of all time, but it definitely could work. Now, in the gameplay, you might notice that I actually have my katana in my left hand, and the reason for that is because, as I mentioned earlier, is that when you get hit with this relic, it applies rot to your weapon, and it's going to override the seppuku buff. So I have like a different weapon in my main hand just to be able to apply rot to it, and then I can use that to actually proc rot alongside all the other status effects I have in my left hand. But this didn't really work out as well because one, I'm not trying to get hidden deep of night, so I'm not going to purposely do it. And two, the rot doesn't actually last long enough, nor does the build up have enough potential to be able to proc rot against a lot of different bosses, which is going to be one of the major selling points of this relic to begin with. Like, it's nice to just slap it on and just be able to gain access to rot and maybe proc rot against the boss. But even when you use this with characters that have high amounts of arcane, it still takes a while to proc the rot, and it's to the point that I'd just rather have anything else on. So yeah, basically I did a whole bunch of yapping to say that it's mid, the rot buildup isn't high enough, the health regen doesn't last long enough, and the damage boosting portion of this is just way too niche to have me recommend using this. Anyway, that is us now done. If you have your own opinions, let me know down in the comments below. And definitely do like and subscribe because I have a lot more Nightreign DLC content coming out along the way. And I'll catch you guys in the next. See yous.